Okay, calling the meeting to order. And as it's the first meeting of the month, I'll read the land acknowledgement. The city of Berkeley recognizes that the community we live in was built on the territory of Chun, the ancestral and unceded land of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone people, the ancestors and descendants of the sovereign Verona Band of Alameda County. This land was and continues to be of great importance to all of the Ohlone tribes and descendants of the Verona Band. As we begin our meeting tonight, we acknowledge and honor the original inhabitants of Berkeley, the documented 5,000-year history of a vibrant community at the West Berkeley Shell Mound, and the Ohlone people who continue to reside in the East Bay. We recognize that Berkeley's residents have and continue to benefit from the use and occupation of this unceded stolen land since the city of Berkeley's incorporation in 1878. As steward of the laws regulating the city of Berkeley, it is not only vital that we recognize the history of this land, but also recognize that the Ohlone people are present members of Berkeley and other East Bay communities today. And I will take a vice chair privilege and say I am reading an incredible book I highly recommend. It's called The Dawn of Everything, and it has extensive sections about California Indians. And I learned so much more than I ever knew before. It's certainly more than the pretty lame state of California fourth grade curriculum reflects. So I encourage everybody to go out and check that out. With that, please call the roll.
Thank you, Vice Chair. For the record, we're at 6:36 p.m. And I'll proceed with roll call. Chair Cayetano has informed us that he's running late. Board Member Calavita is absent on the leave, was granted a leave of absence. That said, Board Member Evans. Here. Board Member Lethbridge.
Here.
Board Member Wells.
Here.
And Board Member Williams also has a leave of absence. And Vice Chair Wilson.
Here.
Okay, we do have a quorum. On behalf of the ODPA, we have Director Aguilar joining us remotely. We have our data analyst Saeed joining us here in person. Our investigator Dylan as well, joining us tonight. Myself, Jose, the policy analyst. On behalf of the DPD, I see Deputy Chief Tate joining us remotely, and Lieutenant Bonaventure joining us here in person. With that said, Vice Chair, we have a quorum.
Okay, let's open it up for public comment. Or do we need to approve the agenda first?
Yes. Approval of the agenda.
Okay, I get a motion?
I move that we approve the agenda.
I second.
Are there any objections to that motion? Seeing or hearing none, the agenda is approved.
Okay, we can move on to public.
Perfect. We'll now proceed to public comment. As a reminder, speakers are generally allotted up to 3 minutes, but maybe allotted less time. If there are many speakers, they may comment on any matter within the board's jurisdiction at this time, except confidential personal matters. With that said, we do have one member of the public who would like to speak. One moment while I get the timer on the screen. And the 3 minutes have started.
Thank you very much. So I wanted to bring your attention to an article in today's New York Times about the New York Police Department handing over a sealed arrest of information to Homeland Security. So information that was supposed to be kept confidential and was not supposed to be handed over to Homeland Security did end up being handed over to Homeland Security. And to me, it's one of these instances of how important it is to make sure that the policies that are in place are actually the practices, because things can go wrong. And so I really appreciate the letter that you have written to council and your forthrightness in saying that you can't in fact say that the policies are being followed because you don't have access to that information. It is really important to see what the practices are and assume that they really follow the policies. Thanks for doing that. I do plan to go tomorrow to the Public Safety Committee meeting, which is going to be considering recommendations from the PAB, and I certainly hope that they give those weightier thought and consideration than they did the last set of recommendations that they got from you. And as you also know, those did at least get proper discussion at the council meeting and got taken off consent. So I don't believe that this can be put on consent by the committee, but of course, the agenda committee might decide to put it on consent. Have to go through that again. The Open Government Commission has continues to urge council to change its practice of putting things on consent when they actually want to not pass something. Just at the last council meeting, there was something that had been put on consent because of a negative recommendation from the Public Safety Committee. And sure enough, one of the people addressing items on public consent got up and said, "Oh, I'm so glad to see that it's on public consent and you're going to do this," when in fact, they're not doing it at all. So it's confusing to the public, and we would really, really like them to stop that practice. And that's kind of it. Thank you very much for the work that you do. I truly, truly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And from our virtual, would anybody like to provide a public comment? Vice Chair, I see no additional hands raised at this time.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to approval of the minutes.
I move that we approve the minutes.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Are there any objections to that motion? Seeing or hearing none, the minutes are approved.
Okay, and then the director's report.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Good evening, Madam Vice Chair, board members, members of the public, colleagues. Please excuse my virtual attendance today. I'm at a constitutional policing conference, so I'm getting updated on a lot of different case law and different statutes relevant to our work. But I also want to open up whenever we have a special month of celebration. We're in May, so it's Mental Health Awareness Month. There is a citywide event that's going to be taking place on May 13th at May 13th between 5 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. in the North Berkeley Senior Center. So hopefully we can have some members of the community show up there and any board members that are interested in attending. I wanted to bring to your attention, and perhaps I was going to ask board member Leftwich there with her institutional knowledge if this is something that's been done in the past, but there's an opportunity to potentially submit an amicus brief regarding something related to our field. So and for the new board members, a few months ago, or actually last year, we informed the board that the Independent Office of Law Enforcement Review and Outreach, IOLERO in Sonoma County, they're the Sonoma County Sheriff Oversight Agency. They were going through a discussion and over there in that jurisdiction about subpoena authority. And now they have a contested subpoena that it's working its way through the California State of Appellate Courts. So there's an opportunity to submit an amicus brief in support of this. And I didn't know if that was something, board member Leftwich, if to your knowledge had been done either in the PRC or the PAB. I suspect that what you would be doing as a board would be recommending that the city submit one, and I suspect that the process would be that the city attorney would write it. But I wanted to stop there to see board member Leftwich if that's something that's even been done before in our oversight system.
Yeah, I don't think so, not that I'm aware of, but as you say, my understanding is that we as a body don't have the authority to file an amicus brief on our own behalf, but the city could. So as you suggested, we could urge the city to file an amicus brief in that litigation.
Okay, and if there's any interest, we'll agendize it for next meeting. It's not agendized for today, but I was just highlighting that as a possibility, and that also gives us a little bit more time to get clarity internally what the process would be there. But thank you for that. Just an update, the annual report is under review. It is agendized for today, so we'll have a conversation about where it stands. We had as was noted, the controlled equipment report letter was sent out. There was a rules and agenda committee that took place this week, and they left the item in the consent calendar. So for right now, as it stands, it's scheduled to go to May 20th. In our letter, the PAB drafted or sent out, rather executed by the chair, will be part of that conversation. But there's also an agenda item here today, so I'm just previewing that issue. For training opportunities, as it relates to NACO, there is a webinar coming up on June 12th. It's regarding AI, the new world of artificial intelligence, opportunities for police oversight practitioners. And for new board members, we're actively working through an analysis on AI as it relates to body-worn camera footage. We suspect that we'll get that to the board in the next couple of months, but it's certainly an area of interest that's taking place right now in our field. But I'll stop it there. I don't see any of our colleagues from the city manager's office, but do the board members have any questions or concerns for our office at this time? Okay. And a gentle one, before I turn it over, Vice Chair, gentle reminder, we participate in Juneteenth event. We sent a sign up. If you're interested and able to participate, please do. We are getting some additional swag, but we usually give some swag and brochures to our community members, and it's a good way to engage with the community. Thank you.
I think it's time for the chair and board member reports. As the vice chair, I do not have a report. Do any other board members? Okay, so we'll move on to the chief of police's report.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Quite a bit going on with us the last few weeks. I'll try to be as concise as possible. Starting out with a few cases of interest, I wanted to talk about an assault that happened at 8th and Harrison in the early morning hours of May 2nd. A suspect confronted a female victim and accused her of stealing some belongings from inside his tent located at an encampment. That was in the 1100 block of 8th Street. There was an argument that escalated where the suspect drew a gun and pointed it at the woman's head, threatening to kill her. She shared that he pressed the muzzle of the pistol to the back of her head, and she was terrified that he intended to kill her. There was another man who intervened, and the suspect pointed the gun at him as well, basically warning him to stay out of it. Both victims managed to escape, and they hid in their individual nearby tents. The suspect located the woman in her tent a couple hours later, and he immediately began punching her while she was laying in a fetal position, hit her several times in the face, caused a small laceration on her forehead. Her screaming woke up the male victim, who ran over to help her, and the suspect then punched him in the face as he tried to intervene. Those two struggled briefly, and then the suspect brandished a knife at the victim and threatened to stab him. The suspect ended up fleeing and warned the victims that he would kill them if he saw them at the encampment again. And then both the victims took off in fear for their safety. The next day in the afternoon, the suspect spotted both the victims near 8th and Harrison. And when he saw them, he immediately threatened to kill them and told them to leave the area. In fear of their lives, they ended up calling BPD, and our officers arrived on scene, located the suspect, who was ultimately identified as being responsible in all the altercations. A search incident to arrest of him was conducted, and he was found to be in possession of meth. And the victims identified where his tent was. A search warrant was obtained, and officers located 3 replica firearms and a pistol holster in their search. Of note, the DA's office charged the suspect with 7 misdemeanors on that case. It included criminal threats, brandishing a replica gun, battery, and being in possession of a controlled substance. Just a couple days ago, many of you may have heard that just before 2 p.m. on May 5th, we received reports of a missing 6-year-old child from Washington Elementary School. He hadn't been seen for about 20 minutes. When officers went to the school, they did a walkthrough in and around the school to try to find him. And although it was a little bit further away, one of our officers, thinking about his own parenting, thought about where a kiddo might go in the area. And a short time later, they located the juvenile at Mr. Mop's toy store, which was fantastic. That was a very happy ending. Of note, yesterday we released our critical incident video for the April 13th officer-involved shooting. Wanted to share that the CIV is part of our ongoing effort to promote transparency, keep the community informed, and also build trust. These videos offer a clear understanding of significant incidents that reflect our commitment to openness and accountability. And I know that we shared that with the ODPA as well. Staffing update, nothing has really changed as far as our sworn officers. We have 151. That includes 6 recruits currently in the academy. We just had 2 recruits graduate from the academy last week, and 1 lateral finish field training with another one to start field training this past week. We have 4 police officer recruits and 1 lateral candidate currently in backgrounds. And then dispatch has been an ongoing crisis with extremely short-staffed personnel. We have currently 17 public safety dispatchers, including 2 in training, and another one's slated to start in May, I guess later this month on the 27th. And we have 4 PSD candidates currently in backgrounds. For CSOs, we have 3 additional ones that will start on May 27th. And in light of current budget constraints, we're holding off on filling 2 of the open positions for CSO, and we'll have to reassess that in the fall to see if the budget stabilizes. As far as training is concerned, this past Friday, we had a joint training at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab on Potter Street. And the exercise simulated active shooter scenarios in a commercial lab environment, focused on improving tactical response, interagency coordination, and victim rescue under threat conditions. They were using the incident command system and rescue task forces. The training gave a realistic and valuable opportunity to strengthen our collaborative response as our officers and fire personnel worked with other neighboring law enforcement agencies and fire departments. Exercises of this nature are vital for strengthening operational readiness and reinforcing unified command and response strategies in critical incidents. The lessons learned during this training, we feel will directly support our continued efforts to protect public safety and improve our preparedness for these types of real-world emergencies. A couple things I wanted to touch on. The chief and I are in receipt of Chair Cayetano's letter regarding the MOU compendium. I know that you guys are going to be talking about this specifically as it relates to 3.1 of our general understandings. I wanted to share that this letter is quite timely as it's mirroring some of our internal discussions as we're doing our MOU compendium review. And as part of that, we have decided that we're going to be removing the general understandings completely from the MOU, highlighting the fact that current state law, current policy, and city council resolutions appropriately advise and guide our staff regarding federal law enforcement interactions, specifically as they relate to immigration enforcement. So this rationale will be reiterated in our staff report that we plan to bring forward before the summer recess. Lastly, I'm also aware that you guys are going to be having a discussion on the citywide project regarding the retention schedule. As part of the city clerk's citywide retention project, the police department, like every other department in the city, we're asked to review our schedules, make sure that we're in alignment with state law. This was a major project that each department's respective subject matter experts met with and provided information to the clerk's office and a consultant to understand the current practice, our policies and any legal updates that need to be considered. So while this work is still underway with the clerk's office, I wanted you to be aware that what you have printed in your packet is the current retention schedule as it is now. I think it was from 2018. And make sure that you're aware that the schedule that you're reviewing doesn't reflect any of the updates that we plan to be making. With that, that's all I have.
Any questions?
Yes.
Yes, I have a question on that last issue, the revision to the retention schedule.
I am so sorry. It looks like, Julie, it looks like you're talking, but I can't hear you.
How's that? Is that better?
I will do this. The mic.
Director Aguilar, can you hear them?
I thought I would, I heard, can you speak?
Oh, I can't hear you
yes.
either. Okay, maybe
Oh.
it's me.
Say, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. You can also hear the deputy chief.
Okay. Yeah, and I think I was hearing board member Leftwich when she was speaking, so.
You can hear me, Director?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so maybe it's on the deputy chief's end?
Yeah, and the transcript is catching you too.
Yeah.
Any direction about how to proceed here?
We could do our, so we could just do the questions through here and.
Through your phone, so.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear me now? I can. Okay, thank you. My request actually relates to the records retention schedule. And our request that we have input in any revisions that are made to the schedule. We understand that those are underway, but we would like to be consulted about that.
So that is a project that the city clerk is taking on. Certainly something that we can share with the clerk's office, and I don't know exactly where it is in process. So that would, I think, be something that we have to connect with them about.
Okay. Because this hasn't come up in the context of our regulations. It's rather a significant issue, and so we're a little concerned to hear that maybe it's being revised without any input from the board. So are you saying that it's kind of a done deal, it's just up to the clerk administratively, or substantively, there's still room for discussion?
I'm saying that it is a project that the city clerk is undergoing. All right, can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I just had to restart it. So what I was sharing is that this is a project that's being worked on by the city clerk's office. We provided a lot of input earlier in the year, and it may have been late last year. I think our last meeting with them was in February sometime. So I'm unclear as to exactly where we are in the process. The only thing I wanted to do is let you know that what you have currently is not sort of the draft of what each department has been working on. So I hear your request. I can pass that on. I also think it would be appropriate for the ODPA or the PAB to reach out to the city clerk's office as well to find out the status of their project.
Okay, thank you. I think we can do that. Maybe Chair, you can do that and update us on the next meeting. Not Chair, Director. Did you hear me?
Okay. Yes, we can do that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, all right. Any other questions? I just have one. When you mentioned removing the general understandings, which I think is a positive move. How does that relate specifically to the request that's included in our agenda packet, which has to do with termination of the rescission of item 3.1 in the compendium.
So as we were going through our edits and updating the MOU compendium, what we did was a deep dive into understanding where the general understandings came from. There has been a change of guard in the policy office. So it was really trying to understand what the purpose of the general understandings were, and why we have a general understanding if not an MOU. And doing that research as it related to trying to identify where 3.4 was rescinded, we found comments in there back in 2018 when Chief Greenwood took it to council, saying it basically calling out at that time that the general understandings were confusing, and with a promise to give us an updated policy, which now we have Lexipol policy 415. So for whatever reason, no one went back through and identified, I think in the course of doing our Lexipol updates and trying to transition us from our general orders to Lexipol. And then when COVID happened, I think there was some pieces of it that just were not carried through. So what I can say is, this is our assessment and what we're doing in our work, not related to the recommendation that is in here. This is something that we have been talking about as a matter of our review. So I'm sharing it today that this is our plan as we move forward. And again, we hope to have everything ready to go to council prior to the summer recess.
Okay, but does the department have a position on our specific recommendation regarding item 3.1?
I think our position is that everything that covers federal immigration and the way that we work with the agencies are covered under Lexipol policy 415, which would more or less make item 3.1 irrelevant.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Deputy Chief. I think we're ready to move on to subcommittee reports.
I'll go ahead and take it from here, starting with our regulations subcommittee.
Yeah, I can give an update on that. So we had 2 meetings last week. One with the internal city stakeholders, and the second meeting was a joint meeting with the union. We continue to make progress, although it continues to be extremely slow. We've asked for a closed session and expect to have a closed session with the labor negotiators June 11th here, so that we can give the board an update on some of the more substantive issues. As mentioned, the last few meetings. It's been a few years since this board voted on the final regulations, which have been now in negotiations for 2 years. So they aren't the same necessarily. Some of the provisions have changed, board members have changed, yet we're expected to, once board member Calavita and I, as the board representatives, once those regulations are finalized, this board needs to vote on them again. And so the idea behind the closed session, even though we've been providing updates at each of our meetings, the idea behind the closed session is to have a closer look at some of the substantive issues, just to make sure that board members don't have any concerns or questions about where we're going. That's my update on that.
You, policy review subcommittee,
No update.
metrics and operations.
No update other than that. I have reviewed the draft annual report, and I look forward to discussing at some point soon with board member Wells.
Thank you for sending it.
Outreach and engagement, board member Willis.
No update.
No update, okay. There'll be no updates for the 10/10/10/34. And then, in terms of our liaisons, Chair Gaetano is currently absent. Vice Chair Wilson, anything on FIP?
Yes, just as reflected, I'm not sure if it's in the packet, but the chair did send a draft letter to the chief for review. This would be a joint letter coming from the board and the chief back to the Public Safety Committee, reflecting a shared understanding of what the next steps would be with respect to FIP reporting. So that letter has gone to the chief. We'll see what happens next.
Okay. And with that, and proceed, just given that, no updates for the policy reviews listed on this page, so. With that, that concludes subcommittee reports.
Okay. We are moving on to the items in 9. The first is the records retention schedule. Board member Lethwich, I think you already kind of teed this up.
Right, so this came up during our labor negotiations last week. The union had proposed 2 different provisions which triggered some concerns about this. The first basically says that while an investigation is in process or told, the chief of police shall take appropriate steps to ensure the preservation of relevant investigation records and information. Which seems pretty straightforward, but then it raises the question of what needs to be preserved, what's currently being destroyed. And so that's why we wanted to see the current schedule. That's when we learned that also that it's being reviewed. And then the second provision that they had requested be included essentially says that following the final disposition of complaints, that the ODPA and the PAB shall destroy all records and shall not retain any records in any form. And as far as the board is concerned, that seems fine. It's not like we as board members need to hold on to records, but it raised the question of, well, what does the ODPA need from an institutional standpoint as far as retaining records, and what's the current practice? Well, it turns out it's in your materials that the current practice was carried over from our predecessor body, the PRC, which kept records permanently. And then there was some suggestion about, well, maybe that's not appropriate, or there should be alignment between the department's record retention and the ODPA's. Well, not necessarily, but it again raised the issue. So I had asked just that this be put on the agenda for us to discuss. And then looking at the materials that were provided, I see that it's pretty complicated, actually. So I'm not here to make any recommendations about, what should be done. But let me see what page that's on.
It's in the supplemental packet.
Right.
I saw it. I think it's the first set of material.
Yes, page 2 of the supplemental package.
Right. And so I was thinking, in order for us to make any recommendations about this, we need to know what best practices are as far as record retention for police departments. It'd be good to know if NACOL has any guidelines, what other California jurisdictions do. It also occurred to me that before we had electronic records, it would be burdensome to hold on to paper forever, but now that records are primarily in electronic form, maybe it's not such a burden, but that's something that would be good for us to know. The other thing is that these record retention schedules were attached. Hold on one second. I mean, for example, on page 5 of the supplemental materials, it says that complaint. I'm sorry, getting confused here about the department. It says that after termination, this is on page 8, that personnel files shall be destroyed after AT+5, so after termination +5. And so I was thinking, well, does that mean that if an officer is terminated for cause, the records are destroyed after 5 years? Does that mean that if that person seeks employment with another department, that other department can't see those records. So I don't know. I'm basically just raising this because I think we need to look into this further because it is important. And especially now that we know that the clerk's office has I guess proposals from the department or is unilaterally making proposals itself about how the department's record retention schedule should be changed, that's something that we should, as a board, should get involved in. And we should also be looking at what ODPA's retention policy should be. And I don't know the answer to that, but I just think we should be looking into it. So my request, after questions and other people's thoughts, would be for staff to look into this further.
Can I ask Director, is ODPA involved in the city clerks? It sounds like a citywide effort to update the retention schedules. Is ODPA involved in that?
Yes, we did meet with the clerk, and they came to us and we provided some suggestions. We mostly try to align with the state law on some of these things. But on other matters where we have digitized, it has become less of a burden, administrative burden to keep some of these records. So it's a little difficult too because a lot of it was carryover from PRC. So some things, the way that they were structured in the PRC, is not necessarily as relevant, and how some of these records were categorized. They're not necessarily categorized in the same way that the PAB does its work. But to answer your question, yes, we've been engaged with the city clerks. We don't know ourselves where it stands right now in the process.
And then for board member Lethbridge, is there time sensitivity on the department aspect related to the regulations work that you're doing?
Well, again, it came up because if the union is asking that the department retain all relevant records, then there's a whole discussion about what relevance means. And the director had asked that the department provide a list of items they weren't retaining that they didn't deem relevant. But then it came down to, well, how long are you keeping it? Because if they're keeping records for a very long time, that evidence is being preserved, right? So we don't need to know what. So it is. So the answer is yes, it is relevant to what we're doing. But as far as state law goes, and I didn't have time to look at these state laws, but as a general rule, state law says it's a floor and not a ceiling. It provides the minimum retention. It doesn't say you must destroy it after X number of years. It says you may not destroy it before that. So there are a lot of references to state laws in this schedule. And I don't know if they say that, yes, they need to be destroyed, or they need to be retained, but there's a big difference between those two.
Yeah. I would just also note that there is a cost even to cloud-based storage. So it's not as if just because it's not a paper file, there's no cost associated with it. Do any of the board members have questions or comments?
I'm just the director with his hand raised.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
I just want to call out one issue too, with board member Lethbridge, what you said that, the board doesn't necessarily keep the records, but I think we need to identify what are board records, and particularly as they relate to personnel records, because we do the initial investigation and we give a report, a findings and recommendations report, but then you as a body have the opportunity to affirm, modify, and reject. So is it after your approval, does it become your record? And administratively, we would hold that record, but I think we just need to spell out some of these things a little bit, because everything was housed under the PRC before, and there was no office commission difference. Now it's office and board. So I think we just need to be clear on what are board records and what are ODPA records, at least as it relates to personnel related matters.
So my suggestion, if other board members don't have any questions, is that one, to reiterate something I asked earlier, we asked the director to follow up with the city clerk's office to get an overview of the project scope and timeline from their perspective. I'm also curious if any consultants are involved, if there's going to be other opportunities for engagement with the various departments and this process. I think that will be instructive. I think the timeline will be important given the time to the regulations work. And so once we have that information, we can decide how we want to take action on the BPD front. It sounds like we have more latitude in terms of ODPA and PAB records. And I know just from doing this in my own organization, it actually is a tremendous amount of work. And so we've talked, Director, about
What's the tremendous amount?
updating your retention schedule and figuring out your whole process and what you're gonna do. So we have talked about at a future meeting, you bringing to this board kind of an overview of the workload of your office, because I think it is an important project, but I think we need to understand in asking you to take this on, how it fits in with the, you know, other items that you have on the to-do list. This is the PAB ODPA record piece. I think we need to move forward with trying to engage on the department record retention schedule now. Does that work? I don't know that we need a motion, but those are my thoughts.
I guess my concern is if it's almost a done deal from the clerk's perspective, and if we haven't had any input and we haven't seen it, that a records retention policy that's too restrictive, we would have concerns about. And I just want to make sure that if we aren't expressing those concerns or trying to express those concerns now, that we won't be missing an opportunity. But I think we don't know enough, at least I personally don't know enough to even analyze whether, you know, what retention schedule would be appropriate. But 5 years to me, just off the top of my head, seems very short for some serious, you know, significant records. It seems like a short retention period.
Are you suggesting something different from what I said? Because I was just asking that we get an update on the project and the timeline from the city clerk's office as an immediate next step.
Right, but yeah, I guess I'm just simultaneously, it would be helpful, I think, to look a little more closely into the substance of it, because what if the clerk says it's, you know, 2 weeks, it's going to be finalized before we have another chance to even have a meeting. So I guess my preference would be that because you're suggesting they just look into the timing, is that right?
Yeah, I think if we get that back from the clerk, then we could say, make a formal request, which we could escalate for more time in order to weigh in. I don't think there's, and I'm just doubtful that it's on that expedited of a time frame, but I have no basis for saying that. I just wouldn't think so.
Yeah,
Because it's huge and they're doing this citywide, that's a big project.
right, right. Yeah, so if the request would just include that, you know, ask, in addition to asking what the timeline is, just saying that the board would like to provide input. That would be my request.
Okay. All right, I think we're ready to move on to 9B. I think this is the director.
I could take the lead, Director. If that's okay.
Yeah, sorry, I was looking for the, yeah, go ahead, you can lead it.
And the materials for item 9B, which is the follow-up discussion and action on the memorandum, providing additional information requested by the PAB regarding a presentation of policy conflict number 19, which talked about the detention and release of inebriated individuals. At the last meeting, as the item suggests, the board asked us to conduct additional research, following up our recommendations that were presented in the report. Particularly, there were 2 questions about what additional objective methods for determining what it meant to be sober enough to be released custody existed beyond the breathalyzer test. And the second was, what role could the SCU have played in this incident, and how it might be, how it could be integrated in the response of individuals detained for public intoxication. In response to the first question, we did implement additional methodologies used for determining whether or not someone's sober. We saw that some of the practices that were both accepted in the medical field and by other agencies, was the use of standardized field sobriety tests as one method. The breathalyzer device was another option, that a lot of the policies that we cited continue to use. But additionally, just the overall clinical assessment, by medical staff was the third option that we incorporated, into the recommendation of the policy. One aspect within the report that we have cited and within the board's discussion, was that one, a breathalyzer, there's concerns about whether or not someone, would be in the right place to be able to give valid consent for a test, even if it's voluntary, at least a breathalyzer test. So, we included the standardized field sobriety test as well as a clinical assessment as options within that policy. For the SEU question, the first aspect that we flagged, which was important just more for further context in the report, was that the SEU wasn't necessarily an option during the time of the incident, but we do run an analysis under the current standards and an updated policy of what role the SEU could play, particularly considering some of the actions that the involved officers took during this time, that could be categorized more as initial caregiving than enforcement action. So with that said, I'll pass it on to the director for any additional comments you might want to flag before we take more questions.
I don't have additional commentary this time.
Any questions? Comments?
Question. I thought this was good. Thank you for doing this. As far as the SCU goes, though, now that that's been turned over to the county, it seems to me that they'll have even fewer resources for Berkeley if their services are going to be provided countywide, right?
I don't think we know that, right? We don't know how many staff they have.
Yeah, at this stage, we're uncertain in terms of how much or how many resources are gonna be available to this new iteration of the SCU at the county level, but it's something that we know would be something that we would continue to track and follow. Either for potential, one, for the policy review that the board has opened on the topic, but just general, what that interaction and what that relationship would be with the city.
Was there something you wanted to suggest we say differently about the SU?
No,
Okay.
that was just a
Okay.
question/comment.
So we have recommendations from staff to advance revisions to policy 431.9, 900.11.2. As well as I think new language for inclusion in policy 900. With the will of the board here.
Well, I think it was good language, just from a process perspective. Were we going to then be recommending this to the department or seeking to meet with them? What was the next steps?
Yeah, so then on page 27, when we included just the draft memorandum, that we typically send a follow-up letter to the department with the recommendations that the board approved. In this instance, we tailored it a bit more, but in terms of question of the next steps, we could tailor it to fit whether the board wants to be actively involved with the development of the state policy after the BPD's consideration, or if it just wants to forward the language. So the actions in terms of next steps for the board are flexible, determining on how the board would like to proceed. Any additional comment on that, Director?
Yeah, I mean, like what you're saying, process wise, it is. I think it's something we're still working on. But if you want to be more explicit about requesting a meeting or put in like we respectfully request some sort of um response within an X period, then maybe we that'd be a good idea. But there's no strict right now sort of process with this. We provide the report to you for your analysis and review, and then we transmit what the board felt were applicable or appropriate recommendations.
So this, as drafted, this would be sent to the department and then sort of a concurrent or separate transmission to council, or,
So we haven't been sending it to council. We send it to the department.
Yeah, I would think it would be helpful to ask for them to respond, you know, saying that we are interested in your response to our recommendations. I wouldn't suggest that we take this on under the policy committee because, you know, we're already drowning with the regulations and then we were gonna move on to body worn camera, so I don't think this rises to that level, but it is important, so I guess my recommendation would be that we send this with a request that they respond, you know, within 30 days or something with their thoughts.
okay, maybe bring that response back to the full board.
Right.
Okay, so I think then, do you want to present a motion?
Yes.
Okay, got a motion and a second.
No, the second is board member. Perfect. So on the motion to accept the recommendation. And transmit the drafted memorandum with the addition of the request. For a response within 30 days. Motion by board member Leopard, seconded by board member Edmonds. We are at forum, so we do need unanimous consent. So I will ask if there are any objections to the motion.
No.
Okay, seeing or hearing none, the motion is carried.
All right, item 9C, annual report, director.
So I noted in the staff report that we provided it to the vice chair, who's the liaison for the board. We do suspect that we're gonna get some revisions on there, so we don't have it present to provide it to you. But I was interested to seeing, based on your preliminary review, vice chair, and also the board, if we can potentially start mapping out a time to one, based on what you believe, how much more work we would need to get it for board consideration. Would we bring it at a regular meeting, or would we set a special meeting for that? And then when we can potentially start mapping out for council review of the report, or council presentation rather. Or I don't know if we're even there yet in terms of mapping this out.
So I reviewed it.
I haven't reviewed it yet.
Okay, has it been sent? Have you taken a look at a board member Lethbridge?
Have I not?
Okay, so, I don't think we're ready to map out a timeline.
Okay.
I think, I will commit to, maybe board member Wells, you and I can connect next week on it.
Mhm.
And then schedule something with you, director, so that we can have that in place for the next meeting.
Okay.
A sense of a timeline, not the report itself, but a timeline of the process.
That's helpful. Yeah. And would it do, and so I can start working at least with council liaisons. Do you suspect that last time we did it as a special meeting? So is that something we should be requesting, or should we try to look for a regular meeting to agendize it?
I don't have strong feelings about that. Do you have a recommendation, or do other board members have thoughts? I don't.
My recommendation would be to do it a special meeting, because sometimes it gets drowned out and they have a heavy agenda calendar and a lot of items. So it might be helpful to get that opportunity to do it with just that item on a special meeting agenda. It's usually on a day that they're already meeting. So it'll be right before their regular meeting.
Okay. All right, I think maybe it sounds like a special meeting. I don't know that we're ready to work on the timing now.
Right, but I can at least alert the desire, and then they can potentially let us know what may or may not work based on the council's workload.
Okay, anything else on the annual report?
Nothing immediately.
Nope, keep going.
Okay, 9D, the calendar. Director, can you take this on in Chair Cayetano's absence?
Yes, so we received a request to explore different days. If we've always agendized 19 meetings, the charter requires 18. So we always have the flexibility to remove one meeting. But we were asked to explore what days, if any, we could potentially remove or move around. And the staff reviewed the calendar based on both the city's calendar, but also any holidays, and we provided there some recommendations. Alice Murillo, do you want to take it over just to walk through?
Yes, so just to summarize what the recommendation ultimately is. First is to essentially cancel the July 23rd meeting, and readjust the meeting, or reschedule the meeting in December with the readjustment to the December meetings. So instead of having one meeting in December, there would be two, one on December 3rd and one on December 17th. The reason for those two particular meeting dates, we know it deviates from the standard second and fourth Wednesday of the month. So that's just so that it wouldn't conflict with any holidays. We know it's the end of the year, so a lot of times there's a lot of travel. But in terms of October and November, logistically, based on holidays and even just the staff considerations that we have to take in terms of the events that go on during those months, October and November weren't feasible. July 23rd, just foreseeing the workload of what the board would have for the rest of May and June. July is when there would be less activity. We recommend against June, particularly because that's when the military equipment report has historically gone to council, and the board has decided to take an opinion on it. So we didn't touch those ahead of the July meetings.
But to be clear, the 17th will be our 19th meeting, so that's also the flexibility there, right?
Correct.
Meaning we don't have to have a meeting on the 17th.
Correct.
Right.
Okay. I'm fine with
I'm fine
that.
with it
So
too.
we have a motion.
I guess I don't understand why we're doing this. I mean, I'm not particularly opposed, I just don't understand the reason to reschedule things. And if we don't have a meeting at that second meeting in July, then we won't be meeting for 8 weeks. And we just always have so much work, it just seems kind of unnecessary to me to get rid of that last meeting in July, and then that second meeting in December, that gets close to Christmas. And we are adding a special meeting now, so, I don't know, again, I'm not particularly opposed to it, I just don't understand the point, Billy.
Unfortunately, I can't speak to the rationale. We were just executing a request to look around what meetings can be moved around. I believe there was just a concern that maybe we're also too heavy on the front end. So this was also, I think, a possibility to ensure. Also, we're not fully staffed. I know we don't like that word for board purposes, but I think this is also an opportunity to sort of recover as a board, and until we're getting more placements in. But I'm speculating here a little bit.
Was it the chair who asked or?
Yes,
Yeah.
it was because the meetings are front loaded, there's fewer meetings when we come back in September. This, because of the way October and November work, the way to add meetings is in December, which is, challenging. I will say, just from the perspective of being on other boards, this board meets a lot, and the 18 meetings a year in the charter is a pretty significant requirement, so I'm feeling like this proposal is fine, and we may not need to meet December 17th either. It doesn't mean that we can't be doing work, we all have plenty of assignments we can be working on, but I'm fine moving it forward. Also with the understanding that we can agendize it another time and bring a meeting back if we need to.
Was that a motion?
That's a motion. I'll move the revised calendar.
I second the motion.
Are there any objections to that motion? Seeing or hearing none, the motion carries.
Okay, so, Director, you're gonna have to help me out with 9E on the controlled equipment report. We have the letter that was sent to council. I think you mentioned, but I'm sorry, I missed what happened on May the 5th with the rules committee. And I think there is some potential for this board to consider additional action at this time, but that's the part I'm not super clear on. So if you could kind of lead this conversation, that would be helpful.
Sure, and just to recap, in the letter is included as part of the record. We were expecting that the Rules and Agenda Committee would have reviewed the letter and considered a few items. One, or a few potential options. One could have been to send it to Public Safety Committee, given the current controversy, or at least put in the action calendar. But the Rules and Agenda Committee this past week were silent on this particular item, so there was no contemplation. I've unfortunately I'm working through our internal mechanisms here, but I'm getting a little bit conflicting language of how to address the body at these conversations. Historically, or since I arrived here, I was able to opine, not necessarily through the public comment process. So usually the mayor would ask me if there was anything and I can speak freely, but now as they're trying to streamline these meetings, we're working out how charter officers are able to communicate. Is it through public comment? Is it through the deliberation process, raising hand? And so we're working through those mechanisms, but in essence, when I tried to alert the while they were deliberating, there was no opportunity to do so because I did it outside of public comment. So I think there was no real consideration of the letter at that level. So now we're at a situation where council could potentially be approving this report without considering that it has potentially violated the review as contemplated in the ordinance. So the chair followed up that there's with the city attorney's office seeking some action regarding this to ensure that the ordinance is being followed as contemplated. I don't know that there's any explicit or action for the board at this time, or I don't want to misrepresent what the chair wanted us to do tonight, but I'm alerting that this is a live issue right now. The chief has the letter, so does the council, but right now it's still agendized for consent for May 20th.
And what is the 60-day trigger? Can you remind us of that, the relevance of the 60-day time period?
60 days as it relates to this review is the chief provides the report by no later than March 15th, or if there is an agreement with the PAB on a different date. But the chief usually provides it before March 15th in the last few years. So you received it March 15th. Within 60 days of receiving the report, you have to agendize your review, which we almost did it as soon as we received it. And then we alerted the chief almost immediately that we wanted these records.
Okay. So I think the chair was interested in discussion of additional action we could take. I saw some reference to injunctive relief. This would be trying to intercede or intervene in the council's potential adoption of the report on the 20th of May. So right now, I think everybody understands the situation we're in. We've notified council that we could not comply with our charter based requirement to review the controlled equipment report. It sounds like this committee has basically ignored that. The report is now going to council, and so the question is there anything else we can or should be doing?
You mean
In-
hiring counsel to file an injunction in court on our behalf? Is that?
Well, that's what it would have to be. I'm just relaying third hand. I don't know, council, if you have. But let's just set aside the particular mechanism, if there is one. We're in a place where I think we have to decide, is there anything else we want to do? I know for my part, I did reach out to my appointing council person, and I will have this discussion with her. But I don't know if there's something else that
Could be done, yeah.
that we want to. It's a pretty drastic step, right? To do something. Okay, go ahead, director.
Yeah, and we were just gonna put the section of the Berkeley Municipal Code that talks about the injunctive relief here. Our analyst Saeed Madi is putting it up. So the enforcement here, and it talks about remedies for violations of this ordinance. So this is the Berkeley Municipal Code.
Oh, okay, that's helpful. I can't believe that.
I can't read that either, but.
Sure.
Can
So-
you read it now?
Okay, so it says this chapter does not provide a private right of action upon a person or entity to seek injunctive relief against the city or any employee unless that person or entity has first provided written notice to the city manager by serving the city clerk regarding the specified alleged violations of this chapter. So we submitted the letter.
Pausing there, did we submit this to the city clerk as a notice to the city manager? Or did we just submit a letter to the mayor and the council members?
It's submitted to the all council email, which includes the clerk and includes also the city manager. But the city manager was also included as one of the stakeholders.
Well, I personally would be completely opposed to us seeking injunctive relief against the department of the city under these circumstances. I'm not saying we would never do it under any circumstances, but this would not be the battle that I would want us to fight, considering all the other important battles that may be out there. I don't know what else we can do, but I would not be supportive of seeking injunctive relief. That means retaining our own attorney, and I just don't see it personally.
Any other?
I think my thought is that if this is important to the board, then we should individually reach out to our city council member and have a one-on-one conversation about the importance of it. And also to hear from them why they are ignoring our request that the director submitted. But I think, I agree with board member Leftwich that I think our goal is to build a closer relationship with the city council to be able to work more productively, not to add more attention to it.
I would second that. I'm particularly curious their rationale for not providing the information even after we requested a number of times. But yeah, reaching out to our, at this point in terms of what to do, like reaching out to our city council person, I'd be in favor of that. I don't know all the specifics about sort of trying to go hiring an attorney and trying to go to the path of getting injunctive relief, but it does, I find it troubling that we're not getting the information we need. So I do think I at least want to do something else at this point, and if that's talking to our city council person who appointed us. Okay with that.
The other question I have, and this is more towards the director, does the city council like really understand the significance of the controlled equipment report? And like what it fully entails, that they would want to know our opinion on it? And why we're not able to give a recommendation because of the access that we're not getting? Like, do they fully understand that? Or is that part of the conversation that we as board members should be having with our individual council members?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think certainly for this new composition of council members, they're new to this, so they might not know the history of it. So those conversations are important. Since I've been here, it's only been on action calendar once, and then they have put it on consent. So there have been sort of superficial reviews, even from when it gets to the councils, and we have alerted the council that it's difficult to assess, if not impossible, true compliance by just looking at the report without looking at the corresponding documents regarding each incident.
So the only thing I'm thinking, if you could put that provision up on the screen again. I don't think, like, even if we tried to sue for injunctive relief, I don't think this letter that we sent, I think it might get kicked out on procedural grounds. I don't think this letter we sent satisfies those provisions. If you could make it bigger, or I think there's an argument that it doesn't. So I'm just wondering if we, as a next step, could send a letter to the city clerk, notice to the city manager, served on the city clerk pursuant to 2.100.060, to notice these specific alleged violations so that it's clearly falling within that section, and say that our request is that council does not approve this report on the 20th of May, absent some resolution of the outstanding PAB request for data. It would be a very short letter, but it would really conform with this code section. So that's like, in addition to us talking to our appointing authorities, that might be a concrete next step that is short of something that I agree with you is not appropriate for this.
Yeah, but I would also just add to it that, like, I think they need to understand the why outside of the technicality of some law or some rule. Like, there's a significance to the Police Accountability Board reviewing this particular type of equipment because of its significance when it comes to public safety. Like, I think they need to understand that perspective.
And I feel like the chair did a nice job in the letter articulating that.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody read, not moving as the council members, but I think it was there, like, beyond just procedural or to satisfy the outlines of the charter provisions. Here's the substantive reason why we think this is important. So when I agree with you, I think it was done. But it sounds like we're moving potentially towards a motion.
I thought you made one.
Okay, great.
I'll second it.
Okay.
Can we repeat the motion?
Yeah, the motion is for the director to provide notice pursuant to municipal code section 2.100.060 to the city manager by serving the city clerk specific alleged violations of the chapter in relation to the review of the 2024 BPD controlled equipment report.
Okay.
And we have a motion by me and a second by board member Leftwich.
Perfect. And are there any objections to that motion?
No.
Seeing or hearing none, the motion is approved. Or motion carries.
All right, so we're on to 9F. This is the discussion of the mutual aid agreement, specifically the recommendation to rescind 3.1. We've had a little bit of discussion with that with Deputy Chief Tate.
And what was her bottom line? I don't think I totally understood what.
I think their bottom line was, and others correct me if I'm wrong, that they wouldn't object to this because they believe policy 415 covers it. So I think that's basically what she said. I'm not.
So 3.1 is irrelevant. That's what I wrote down, but I still didn't. I had a few questions about this letter. Chair isn't here, but
Then you can, maybe we know the director.
Okay.
Not talk.
Okay. So I thought this was a good letter, but it sounded to me like there was a broader ask than in the ray line. Because towards the end of the letter, we start talking about, seems to me that we're asking, a couple of things. Seems to me that we're asking to codify and expand upon the sanctuary city resolution in addition to rescinding this mutual aid agreement. And looking at the attached materials, it sounds like the mayor has asked for that too, rather than just having a resolution to adopt an ordinance. And then we're asking that the ordinance include certain things, record keeping things and other things. So that was my first thought, just that it's a broader ask and that's reiterated in the first paragraph. I think it's a broader ask. But then the other question I have is I thought we understood from prior meetings that the MOUs are only effective for 1 year. And since none of these have been renewed since 2018 or whatever it was, that actually none of them are operational. But then the letter says on page 2 that these are all operational. And so I didn't understand that because I thought we had determined that the city's failure to annually review these means that they're not operational.
Where do you see that on page 2?
Second full paragraph. The last sentence, the PAB confirmed during meetings with BP representatives that this agreement is operational.
It means they're following it. That's our understanding, is even if it hasn't been approved or reviewed within the 12-month timeline, they're operational, meaning they're operating pursuant to the, that's what that means.
I guess it seems to me that this is an opportunity, we don't need to belabor it, but to point out that the MOUs, they require annual renewal and they haven't been renewed since 2018 or 2017, whenever it was. I mean, shouldn't we be at least mentioning that here and then say, nonetheless, we understand that the city is operating under its terms or something like that?
I think that's fine. I feel like we have, and we know the department is undergoing this effort to update everything by this summer.
But this is going to the mayor and the city council, and they don't necessarily know, right? That.
Yeah.
Anyway, so those were my two thoughts, just that the ask was a little broader. I thought the act is broader. And that, and then just one other word thing on page 16, the first full paragraph, the second sentence, in practice, it seems optimistic to expect BPD to request the assistance, blah, blah, blah. And I just thought unrealistic was a better word choice there. or naive. Maybe unreal, that optimistic wasn't the right word choice, but other than that.
Okay, so it sounds like the recommendation is to add in a sentence clarifying that these MOUs have not been formally ratified by council since 2018. Then there's a word choice change here from optimistic to unrealistic. On the broader scope, I agree with you. I'm kind of uncomfortable with it, but I also defer to the chair. He's done a lot of work on it, and I know the mayor has requested this, so I'm okay with the broader scope of this document. I mean, I agree with you. I haven't really tracked that, but it is broader than just rescinding 3.1.
Because the last paragraph says at the very least,
Yeah.
any request, and so if that's the least, then what's the most? So I just felt like that kind of emphasized that our ask is broader than that. If we're saying at the very least, we ask that they rescind.
So do you have a specific ask?
Or just take it
Or
out?
just to change the reline, or because the paragraph before the at very least does talk about like something else we could do.
Right, well, the ray line could have, after the USCIS could say, and codify / expand upon the sanctuary city resolution. Because that's what we're asked, I mean,
Okay.
that's what we want, right, is a,
Yeah,
And Director, I want those sentence hand raised for Director?
No, I don't wanna stop the flow of this. I can wait if this still being resolved.
no, I was gonna make a motion. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
well, yeah, I was just gonna say that I understood the focus to change from all the MOUs being outdated for this very specific urgent request because there's a live discussion on sanctuary cities. But the MOUs being outdated is still an active sort of discussion that we were having with council. So maybe I misunderstood but I thought that this was very narrow, specific to these sanctuary city policies. So
It is, I just think board member Laffin should say it's a missed opportunity not to also flag that issue in this official correspondence. So what I'm
Okay.
hearing is the reline would be changed to add and additional, I'm sorry, what was your language?
and codify / expand the sanctuary city resolution. If that makes sense, that's just something I wrote
Okay.
down quickly.
Well, and I think our motion should be broad enough to allow wordsmithing, because I understand what you're saying, okay. And then we're gonna do that word change from optimistic to unrealistic. And we're gonna add in a sentence about the MOUs have not been ratified by council since 2018.
I mean, you could even say it could be as a preliminary matter, we know blah, 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 you know,
Yeah.
something like that, but just to have it in there somewhere.
So I've made a motion.
Second.
Are there any objections to the motion? Which essentially to accept the letter with the noted edits.
Yeah.
Seeing or hearing none, the motion carries.
Okay, and with that, I think we go to public comment.
Okay. Director, are you done with your next item?
I was just going to say, just for procedural matters, and I hope this doesn't change the substance of the letter, but we'll always add the clerk, just pursuant to that code section, if it becomes relevant again, that the clerk needed to be noticed. So I'm just stating that for the record in terms of the stakeholders that are going to receive this at the end.
With that, we'll now go to public comment. Since we don't have anybody physically present at this time, we'll now proceed with our virtual attendees. If you're attending virtually and would like to provide public comment, please use the raise hand icon or *9 if you're calling in. Vice Chair, at this time, I see no hand raised.
Okay, then I think we will go into closed session.
Okay, for those attending remotely, you're free to remain in the webinar. The audio and video recording will end, and we'll be returning back once closed session has been concluded.
Okay, we're back from closed session, nothing to report. I am going to adjourn the meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
Or I'm making the motion to adjourn, I've gotten a second. All right, meeting adjourned.
Okay, this meeting has adjourned at 8:04 p.m. Thank you.